And good morning, and we are really excited for you to be here. We're going to deep dive into the Database Savings Plan that was just announced yesterday during Matt's keynote. Hopefully you had a chance to hear that. It was the actual last item before the buzzer beater, right? So we are really excited to dive deep with you today. It was one of the #1 requested features since for quite some time. And the Compute Savings Plan went live about 6 years ago. We've added SageMaker, but the demand for this Database Savings Plan has been extraordinary. And that's because customers see a lot of value in it and also want flexibility. My name is Adam Driver, by way of introduction, not the actor Adam Driver, but the Adam Driver that works at AWS. I've been here for 5 years. My role is a leader in our solution architecture team, primarily focused on databases. So I've been living and breathing databases for quite some time, and have been doing it here at AWS for the last 5+ years. And with me on stage today, I've got Rick Oakes, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Rick. I lead the optimization product team. So that includes products like Compute Optimizer, right-sizing recommendations, savings plan recommendations, cost optimization hub, savings plan analyzer, RI recommendations. And I also sit on the FinOps Foundation Technical Advisory Council, representing AWS's perspective and our customers' perspective on the FinOps framework and how it evolves over time.
Great. So we're going to be your host for the next 45, 50 minutes. I love audience participation, and we were talking to some people earlier. It'd be great to get a show of hands, and I'm just a hand-wavy person, but to kind of understand who in the room is with a FinOps group by show of hands, just to see, okay, there's a good quantity there. And then how about DBAs, or people that are supporting databases, maybe doing some reserved instances, okay. And then a couple no hands went up. So I'm assuming you do both, or is there some combination there? But let's just continue the audience participation. How many people is this your first reInvent? That's almost half from what I can see. All right, so I don't want everyone else to feel left out. So if everybody who is not their first reInvent can put their hand up, please, and then put it down if it's your second or your third. You can start putting it down. Fourth, fifth. We're going to see who's the longest. Let's go to sixth, seventh, eighth. I see 2 hands remaining. Ninth. Oh, they both went down. Congratulations. So if you have other questions, we've got 2 people that have been doing this for 9 years with us. So thank you. They can hopefully help answer some questions. But let's dive into the agenda. We're here to talk about how this is going to work, what it covers, and more importantly, some tools and technologies and best practices to actually make this work for you and really maximize your savings. So on the left on the agenda is where we're going to cover database savings plans. A lot of excitement here because the coverage will really drive the engines, the instance types, as well as the provisions versus serverless. So really cool capabilities that the database savings plans will cover. And most importantly, the portability and flexibility. If you leave here with nothing, think about having flexibility to turn new database engines on, change the usage, change how they're deployed, and having that savings plan cover that as you make choices and architectural decisions. We know that changes across regions, the instance types, as well as the deployment model across dev, test, and production are critical for you to maximize that. And then we want to make sure we cover the differences between reserved instances. A lot of the database customers that I speak to are buying specific reserved instances for an engine type, for a workload, and really locking in that 3-year commitment to maximize the savings. We think there's some additional flexibility to go with that. And Rick is actually going to cover, if you're heavy on reserved instances, how do you migrate, or what is your plan to move to a database savings plan if that's the path you choose? And I think on the right side, you will learn and hear, you probably already know a lot of these things, but you'll see it in the technology. We're going to show you some live demos that actually walk through the recommendation part, talk about the math behind the scenes, and allow you to see some scenarios that we've prepared to kind of walk through things to maximize that utilization and coverage. And last but not least, we definitely want to make sure you leave with some best practices. So why did we create the database savings plan? Anybody? The 9-year person says, I'm tired of hearing us ask for it. That's definitely customer feedback, but we wanted to have that portability and flexibility. We wanted to make sure that you had a pricing savings model that would automatically drive savings. Not that you would have to recalculate it and figure it out, but provide trustworthy recommendations to allow you to drive a 1-year commitment. So again, flexible, automatic, and consistent. That pricing model will drive savings. It's different than the reserved instance of a 3-year commitment. This is a 1-year commitment, and there is no upfront payment. And lastly, there's no waste because everything that isn't covered is billed at on-demand rates. So you're really removing your waste and you're and maximizing your investment. So let's talk coverage. Everybody always wants to know, what does it cover? What are the things it may not cover in terms of corner case? The database savings plan supports both Intel and Graviton instances across generation 7 and 8. It covers both serverless, kind of managed services, as well as your provision deployment models. And this broad coverage ensures, regardless of your current architecture, or as I touched on, changes to the architecture and future choices, we can benefit these across this database savings plan. So super excited about the coverage. Here's a good shot to maybe take a picture of. This is the one that is good to keep a record of. This is details by database services. There were a lot of DBAs in the room. I hope you're using the right database engine and maybe multiple database engines. But on the left, just to orient you on this slide, the left covers the database services that we currently support with this database savings plan. There's 2 columns for discount. One is if it's deployed by a specific instance type, and the other one is if it's in a serverless or more of a managed capability. And then there's specific details that talk about which generation of 7 or 8 and how it's covered and what that maximum. So just to walk through this, Aurora Postgres at the top has a 20% discount for the instance deployments and 35% for serverless. So that is the highest discount on the chart at 35%. And then it calls out the details. We want to make sure that RDS SQL Server, we want to make sure that the license, bring your own license, all of that is kind of covered to the database instance usage. Aurora DSQL, a little easier. It's serverless only, and it's 18%. And as we walk down, DynamoDB, a very popular database, is between 18 and 12, and its on-demand throughput is 18%, whereas the actual provision throughput is 12%. So that's why you have 2 numbers in some of those columns. Again, I won't go through all of these, but we're really excited because the savings plan covers all of those database services that are listed on the slide. Very, very powerful. We think this will definitely move the flexibility and maximize savings for customers. I'm going to keep going. So why is this flexibility and portability that I've mentioned a few times important? It's important because it allows you to make a commitment and then make changes and choices along the way. Your requirements are changing, your demand and your capacity is changing, and you don't have to manage multiple commitments for a particular workload with a reserved instance. You've got flexibility on how you do that. So we really believe the move usage between database services, switch your engines, as well as allowing you to bounce between serverless and provisioned, again, across your dev, test, and production environments. The change is really important because we're constantly becoming more resilient. We're allowing you to move across availability zones within regions, stuff that you're doing today. But the savings plans, again, will allow you to have that coverage and that flexibility. The reserved instances require specific reservations, as you probably know, the people that utilize those in particular instance types. And this will allow you also to allow you to be more dynamic when it comes down and have an evolving architecture that maximizes and meets the business requirements you have today and will allow you to adopt to those in the future. So again, flexibility, portability, and this move, switch, change, and adopt allows you some really good choices going forward with the database savings plan. The next slide. Again, the maximum saving, 35%. Which service was that? Yeah, from the last slide. Thank you, Aurora. So we're really excited about that. It's a 1-year commitment, which is different than the reserved instances, which are a 3-year commitment. And then there's no upfront payment. There's some advanced pay options. But again, the tagline I want you to take away from this is the savings, and then there's on-demand pricing for anything else that is not covered with the database savings plan. So really, really excited about that, and again, driving that flexibility. How does it work compared to reserved instances? And I've talked about this a little bit, and I don't know how many people are really comfortable with reserved instances, but I wanted to just call out just the big differences. The first one is that the database savings plans work with your specific pricing programs that you have in place. They can be utilized with your discount and your pricing agreements for additional savings. However, the database savings plans and the database reserved instances cannot be combined on the same workload. So there does have to be a choice based on the workload in terms of how you're actually providing that discount. Across dev, test, and prod is a good example. But let's talk a little bit more detail on when should I use one or the other. And then again, the common question we get is if I'm using a lot of reserved instances, how do I migrate? What is my strategy to get to the database savings plan if that's where I want to end up? So on the left here, we think we've netted it out very clear that you should use the savings plan if you want to be able to move between database services and instance types. And we also want the ability to adopt new technology really quickly and try a new database service without managing separate commitments is a classic reason to use the database savings plan. And then the goal is to simplify your cost management across all these database services. However, there makes sense to use reserved instances. For those of you that have a stable, predictable, known workload on specific instance types that you've already implemented and is not very spiky and you know exactly what it is, it makes sense to have a 3-year longer commitment that maximizes even further discounts. As I talked about, you do need a reservation for those reserved instances, whereas the database savings plan, you don't. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Rick. I think we've covered just kind of what it is and what the coverage is and some of the flexibility. And now I'll turn it over to Rick to kind of dive a little deeper.
Thanks, Adam.
Sure.
So as we were building database savings plans, we talked to a lot of customers about how they do their purchasing strategies and planning for compute savings plans and instance savings plans as well, to learn about the pipeline and workflow and the process of how do you make the purchase decision, how do you do your purchase analysis, and then how do you track the success of these purchases after you've made that purchase. So we have a little bit of a lifecycle slide here that shows the process. First, determining what savings plan you're going to purchase, how much. In this specific case, there's less decisions you have to make because it's already 1 year, no upfront. But how much you purchase is still a really big part of the puzzle to solve. And once you add that to cart and make the purchase, then it becomes a bit of a tracking game where you need to track coverage, utilization, and the discount you're receiving from that savings plan to make sure it's meeting the needs and the expectations you had when you made your purchase. And then as you track your coverage and utilization, which we'll get into in more details and depth in a few slides, you may find that you want additional savings plans. Say there's more on-demand spend to go cover, there's more savings to go cover. That's tracking the coverage and utilization will help you decide when it's time to go back to the beginning of this pipeline and make some new purchase decisions for your savings plan opportunities. So we have a couple of different options or methods for purchasing new savings plans. We have a recommendation product. This is the same product that if you're used to compute savings plans today, it's the same product, same experience, same console location. So hopefully for those of you experienced and comfortable with the savings plan product experience, this won't be a new thing for you. The idea is to make this easy and comfortable so there's not a lot of overhead with managing and purchasing commitments. So those recommendations are a great starting point for you. Those recommendations will look at all of your historical on-demand usage and find the most optimal, highest discount purchase amount for you based on that historical usage. And you can just click add to cart, and you're off to the races saving money. For more advanced users, you probably want to test out different purchase amounts, maybe look at different specific periods of time in your history. And we have a new product we announced last year at reInvent called Savings Plan Purchase Analyzer. This has been a very popular tool for our FinOps customers that are doing a lot of analysis and purchasing decisions, who maybe want to layer different savings plans together or stagger their purchases. This product helps because it'll show you the same kind of information, how much you're going to buy, how much discount you're going to get, the coverage and the utilization for any purchase amount you want. And so that's maybe a more advanced approach. But what's interesting is you can kind of easily transition from the recommendations to Purchase Analyzer and maybe test out different purchase amounts quickly and easily by moving between the two product experiences. So as we discussed, the first question is, what are you going to purchase? In this specific case, database savings plans, but we really want to know how much savings plan. Is there any other details? Is it specific? Are you going to buy for a specific linked account? Are you going to buy a savings plan for your payer account, which will cover all of the usage and all of your linked accounts? And so that decision, what are you purchasing? Whether that's maybe a reserved instance or a savings plan. Then it goes to how much to purchase, which we have a recommendation and savings plan analyzer products for. And then tracking usage. In the billing and cost management console, we have coverage and utilization reports for savings plans, so you can track over time continuously how much savings you're getting and what percentage of your usage is covered by your commitments.
Hey, Rick, a question that we get a lot is what's the math with that recommendation? I know we produce a recommendation, but what's the math behind that? And we know it's trustworthy, but how trustworthy is it?
That's a great question. So we get that question from a lot of FinOps teams that are trying to figure out, like, should I build a spreadsheet and look at my on-demand costs myself and download the CUR and look at it? And the idea behind the recommendation is we want to do that for you. It's a lot of heavy lifting and it's a lot of math. And so in our recommendation algorithm, we use something called a golden section search algorithm, which is actually, like, you can open up Google and type it in and you'll see golden section search is a very common algorithm. But what it's doing is it's testing a bunch of different purchase sizes and finding the one with the highest amount of savings. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's finding the low usage amount, because as your usage accrues over time, you're going to have peaks and dips, especially with serverless, because you may be having like spiky workloads during the day, and during nights and weekends you have no load. Or maybe you're a company that has a lot of usage weekends and nights, as an example. And so these spikes and dips in your usage mean that a recommendation will find how much of those spikes and dips you should cover for the maximum dollar amount of savings. And so the recommendation in this graph is sort of in the middle there. And if you purchase more than the recommendation, you'll actually net a little bit less savings. And if you purchase less than the recommendation, you will also net a little bit less savings. So the recommendation is designed to find mathematically the highest dollar amount of savings that's available based on your historical usage. And you can pick in the recommendation 7, 30, or 60 days look back period. So if you have changes in your environment recently, you can kind of pick the window of time that is more representative of what you believe will be your future usage.
And even with custom dates, right? It's not just fixed.
So yeah, so in Savings Plan Analyzer, you can do custom dates, which is it's a nifty trick, and I'll demo that as well. So as an example, we made a little bit of an image to show that, like, we analytically graph out how much savings or what the total cost is and find the absolute lowest point of cost for what specific purchases you can make. And that's what our savings plan recommendation algorithm does. And it's very important that we're transparent with how the recommendation is generated by showing the utilization graph, the cost graph, so that way you can always double check the math yourself. But what's really cool is we actually take a little bit of your monthly bill end code that we run to publish the bill, and we run the part of it that calculates your savings plans being applied against your resources. So we actually run a part of the end of month bill computation when we generate the recommendations to double check that it's going to yield exactly the savings as long as your usage is similar to what it was in the look back period. So what changed? What's new in the console? How many of you are familiar with the recommendations or savings plan analyzer products in the console today?
Good number, yeah.
Okay, awesome. I like seeing that. You'll see now, as of yesterday at like 8 a.m., a new option in the recommendations and purchase analyzer. You'll see Database Savings Plans is now an option for you to click and get those recommendations. The recommendations are already generated and available on all of your accounts where there is eligible on-demand usage. So you can select that. You'll immediately see these recommendations populate on the bottom, and then you can click View Details on these recommendations. Now, there's a lot of colors and graphs on this slide, so we're going to go through it individually. You'll see the first graph on a new recommendation is how much you're currently covering with existing savings plans, how much the recommendation is advising you to purchase to cover additional on-demand, and what is the remaining on-demand that is not ideal to cover with a commitment because the discount or savings is not positive. So that is the left graph, and you can just track over time and understand like, okay, here's how much I'm gonna have left over, and here's how much coverage I'm going to get. Note that your FinOps teams will love you if you make a lot of these purchases because the bill month over month gets much more stable and consistent when you convert your on-demand spend to a flat hourly rate savings plan. So your finance people will love this. The people that read the bill and try to make sense of it and explain it, having a nice consistent flat rate hourly fee is much easier to handle because you have less variability in your spend. On the right side of the screen, we have the coverage graph. This will show you how much of your on-demand spend is being covered by this newly recommended commitment. And it will also show you what your current coverage is. So if you already have some savings plans for databases, maybe not, but although I did have some customers yesterday already make savings plan purchases, which was pretty cool.
All right.
You'll see your current coverage and then what the coverage would be if you purchased the newly recommended savings plan. So coverage is very important. For those of you in the audience that are FinOps, you know a lot of companies target a certain average coverage percentage. They want to cover 70, 80, 90% of their on-demand spend. They want to leave a little bit left over for maybe if they're going to run an optimization campaign like migrating to Graviton or going to serverless. Those are important elements of how to make your decision. And then on the bottom right, you'll see how much of this savings plan will be consumed or used. And there may be dips in this graph, and it's important to note that it's okay to have dips in utilization and have a little bit of savings plan go unused.
I'm always drawn to this utilization chart in the lower right, and what Rick just touched on. For those of you that might not be in FinOps, why wouldn't I just do a blanket coverage and ensure that I had 100% coverage or 105% coverage, Rick?
Yeah, it's so because you can either like optimize for max coverage or utilization, and you kind of have to pick which one's more important to you. But if you maximize your utilization, it means you're buying a smaller savings plan that's always going to be fully used. It means you have a lot more leftover on-demand spend that you're paying the full on-demand price for instead of having it under commitment. So we do talk to customers that they see an unused savings plan and they're like, we don't want that. But you actually get more savings if you purchase the recommended amount, which doesn't always have 100% utilization.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about how the recommendations work. Now we're going to talk about how savings plans apply to your usage. When you're using Purchase Analyzer or recommendations, or even when your month-end bill process is running, savings plans will apply to the highest discount resources first. This is really important because, as Adam mentioned, serverless has a higher discount, 35% for RDS and Aurora. That's an amazing discount. We want to make sure you get absolutely every dollar of that higher discount first. What that means is that 35% Aurora serverless pricing will always consume the savings plan first, and then it'll go down the list in the discount amount, meaning first we consume 35% Aurora serverless, then Elasticache, and then DynamoDB, and it steps down by the discount percent. So as you purchase more and push your savings plan coverage higher, you get sort of like diminishing returns as you get closer and closer to your break-even point or your highest ROI. So you will get the highest savings with smaller savings plans, but the recommendation will calculate all of that and tell you what the ideal purchase amount is for max savings. So how do we see customers using savings plans today? This is important because a lot of companies have invested time and analysis and effort into coming up with purchasing strategies and plans for how to approach fairly expensive and important investments for the future of their cloud spend. What we see is laddering or incremental purchasing becoming a very popular method for FinOps teams. And what this means is you can purchase a savings plan right now before you leave the conference and start saving immediately. And it doesn't have to be the full recommended purchase amount. It can be a smaller amount. You'll immediately get some savings, especially if you're running serverless, with a pretty high discount amount, the highest discount amount, because it'll be applied first. And you can always purchase more. There's really not a downside to staggering or layering purchases together because you can always revisit, and if utilization changes or grows, you can make another purchase. There's not really a downside. All of the savings plans will work together and apply to all of your usage together. So purchasing incrementally, whether that's monthly, sometimes quarterly, some customers, we actually see weekly savings plan purchases. And this is really cool because for those of you that have been patiently waiting for an RI to expire and kind of getting a little antsy with that, having incremental purchases means you're not going to have one giant expiration of a commitment 12 months from now that you have to wait for. And you'll have kind of more staggered expirations of your commitments in case maybe your usage drops, right? So this is a nice way to get even more flexibility out of your savings plan purchases by laddering and staggering them together to kind of build up to the amount of coverage you want for your spend. So how do we move from reserved instances to savings plans? So we know a lot of customers use reserved instances for RDS, and those are 1 or 3 year commitments that you can make to receive a discount for a specific instance type in a specific region or zone. And what we heard is a lot of customers really like migrating to Graviton or moving to the newest instance family and generation to get better CPU performance, which also allows you to use things like Compute Optimizer, right size recommendations, personal fan of that. So making sure that you have that flexibility to make those changes like Adam talked about, that if you're gonna migrate, maybe change database services, go to serverless, that flexibility was key. And so deciding your overall commitment strategy of where you're gonna be making reserved instance purchases for those stable workloads that are not gonna change for a long time, and then using savings plans to essentially layer on top for all of your usage that may be more flexible or change over time. And so you can do both. You can use your reserved instances for your stable long-term workloads, but for that usage that maybe you need more flexibility or you have plans to move to Graviton or do optimization programs, that savings plan flexibility is really important for you. So deciding on a commitment strategy is important. Establishing what does your utilization look like over time, what does your spend look like over time, and how much of that do you want to cover? So as you're going through this process, the most important part of database savings plans is that it's not one service. It is 9 services of usage. This allows us to stack the usage from all of these services together and cover more of it because, say, your DynamoDB usage is dipping, but maybe your RDS usage is increasing certain hours of the week. By stacking all of this usage together, we can cover more of that usage with a single savings plan or multiple savings plans. We believe this will allow you to purchase and cover more of your usage with more discounts. And especially for serverless, which did not have a discount offering previously, this is a brand new discount. So we believe this will save a lot for our customers, and we're really excited to see it in action. So combining usage for all of your database services together will allow you to make bigger purchases and achieve more savings. So you can also, you can look at the individual services and usage for the services. You can make database savings plan purchases for those services, or you can just combine and look at all of that usage together, which is what we do in the recommendations and savings plan analyzer tool. So moving from reserved instances to savings plans, I think one of the interesting migration strategies would be to wait for them to expire for each service, and then you take that on-demand usage once it frees up and comes off of a reserved instance. And then you can start to put together a purchase plan and gather that utilization information. And maybe if you would like to repurchase reserved instances for those stable workloads, and then convert the rest to savings plans. So purchasing for maybe sort of like an 80% target, get your coverage, get your highest discount usage done first, and then you can leave that 20% for maybe future plans on modernization, right sizing. Switching to Aurora IO optimized, another great option. So one way to think about this is to track the expiration dates of your reserved instances for each of your services. So in the RI inventory console, in the cost management console, you can track the expiration dates of all of your reserved instances and then make a plan for aggregating all of that usage together for all of those services and then start covering them with savings plans. So by tracking all of that, we can convert all of the usage from all of these different services into one pool of usage and spend for all of these 9 database services and track and manage them to make your purchases. We talked a little bit about staggering. So here's a little bit of a visual example. As your reserved instances expire, or as you maybe work with a lot of your different engineering teams and understand what resources they're running and how they're running them, you can incrementally add and increase the amount of savings plan coverage over time by making those purchases. Here's an example of over time, as your RIs expire, you can either repurchase RIs, you can convert to savings plan spend, and by doing so, you can increase the amount of spend that is covered by a discount or a commitment over time, yielding a higher total amount of savings. We feel that with reserved instances, a lot of customers were hesitant to make that purchase because you maybe didn't have high confidence in knowing the future of, like, maybe a new instance type comes out we would like to optimize or migrate to, or we're not sure if this workload is going to exist in 6 months. And that flexibility of database savings plans will provide some sort of insurance so you know you can utilize that discount with any other resource type. Once you've made your purchases in the console, you can go to the billing and cost management, cost and utilization reports. Here's an example of what it looks like after you've made your purchases and you would like to track how much of that spend is being covered by a new savings plan. This is really important because if your coverage starts to dip, that's a great opportunity to go and analyze whether you would like to make additional purchases, or maybe some engineering teams spun up some new resources and they're utilizing those resources for a brief period of time. Maybe they're testing something out, maybe they're kicking the tires on a different service, or scale testing or load testing. And understanding why the coverage has a dip is important, because it may not be a moment where you want to make a purchase for that. It may be something where an engineering team is testing something or trying something out. Okay, we're going to switch over to demo now.
I'll let you do the demo.
Okay, so here's the billing and cost management console. For those of you in the FinOps space, I'm sure you're very comfortable and familiar with this. For those of you with more of a database background, a non-financial background, this is the location that all of our FinOps customers spend a ton of time to look at and understand their cost, their spend, usage data, details, recommendations. You'll also see we have a product in here called Cost Optimization Hub. That'll get you Aurora IO optimized recommendations, RDS right size recommendations, idle recommendations to help you optimize and save even more. In the billing and cost management console on the left side, you'll see recommendations and purchase analyzer. Again, these are the same products that you're experiencing today or have today or the last several years for compute savings plans and instant savings plans purchases. So there's not really a new product experience here necessarily. We're just improving these products to include database savings plans. As you saw in the slides, we now have a new database savings plan option in the recommendations. Can you all see that screen? It's a little small. Yeah, okay. Once you select database savings plans, we will show you a recommendation that we've already generated for you. In this case, I can save $315 a month on a recommended purchase, and you can pick, do I want a recommendation for the payer level, a specific linked account, and do I want it based on 7, 30, or 60 days? We also have options for savings plan term and option. Those only apply to compute and instant savings plans. For database savings plans, they're locked at 1 year, no upfront. So in this case, I've increased my usage a lot in the last week in preparation for reInvent. So I'm going to pick 7 days because I think that usage is more what I expect to have in my environment going forward. So I picked 7 days, and then we're going to look at this recommendation and see what it tells me to purchase. In this case, I've got some spikes. I've actually been running some serverless in my environment for the last week or so. I wanted to show what it looks like to have a highly dynamic environment. If you look at the recommendations in your payer account or for an account with a lot of usage, you'll see lots of spikes and dips, especially if you're running serverless or say you're doing RDS auto pausing. Does anybody in the audience do that where you pause your RDS instances for cost savings for up to 7 days at a time? Okay, that's great. So you're going to see dips and peaks in your usage, and it's really important that the analysis and the recommendations account for that. So here I've got some dips and some peaks in my usage. And in this case, over the last 7 days, I can save about $2,000 a month or 9% of the cost just on my last 7 days of usage. But you'll see these dips actually go below the purchase amount. So I want to understand what's happening here. And so I can click over to the coverage graph. This is the same graph we showed a little bit earlier in the slides, but I want to know what percentage of the spend or usage I have is going to be covered by this new recommendation. And I can see that it kind of dips between 76% and 100%. So that's sort of my peak to mean, that's my high and my low of usage over time, and that's what a new savings plan would cover when it comes to my spend. Then I want to track how much of this savings plan is being consumed. Am I leaving any of that savings plan on the table? Now again, I would advise you not to think of it as waste because you still get a higher amount of savings. I'll give you an example. Say you turn an instance off on the weekends for say 20% of the time, but you have a 25% option to save. It's still worthwhile to buy a commitment or a discount vehicle because that 5% extra savings will yield you a lower total bill. But it means your commitment might not be used 100% of the time, and that's perfectly okay. Because the whole idea with optimization here is to ultimately lower the bill. We want to see that number as low as possible with no impact on performance and availability of your workloads for your customers. So seeing utilization below 100%, like we talked about earlier, it's okay. Don't run from it. It's not the boogeyman. Some FinOps teams, they chase this down to 0. They want 0 unused commitments, and we recommend targeting your total savings amount or your coverage amount instead. So if I scroll down, you can see some additional details. These won't really change a whole lot for database savings plans, but you can see if this recommendation is at the payer level, the look-back period, the average hourly utilization by percent if you want to target a specific percentage, And same with coverage. You can see an average coverage percent here. Again, a lot of FinOps teams will target a specific number here because they want to cover a certain percentage of their spend to minimize risk and maximize the flexibility. Okay, so that's the recommendation. So that's the out-of-the-box experience for what we've already generated for you today in your console. But if I know that I've got like some usage patterns that are more representative, I can click over here to Purchase Analyzer, and now I've got a lot more control over the engine that populates and calculates the recommendation. And I can actually come in here and I can change the look-back period to any custom range I want. And I was running a lot of serverless and higher usage between the 28th and the 1st. I was running some usage over the weekend. So I can pick this specific date range, and then I can run the recommendation engine again. So we're gonna run analysis, and it's gonna take a few seconds because it runs a portion of your month-end billing process code, which applies and simulates all of how the savings plans will apply. And once that runs, you're gonna get that same set of graphs. In this case, it's telling me there is a flat rate purchase to make that will fully cover everything of $29 an hour. That's a pretty big savings plan, and it's gonna save me over $5,000 a month, and it's gonna estimated save me 21% off of my spend. So again, the more serverless you're using, you're gonna have higher discount amounts, and it's gonna be consumed first, and so you'll see this number go up. But I know that I had some dips over this period of time, and so I wanna understand that. So I can come into utilization to understand how much of that new savings plan is gonna be consumed. And this may be an opportunity actually as well for optimization, where if I've got some periods of time of low utilization, I can schedule ETLs or backup jobs or some of that sort of other usage in those time periods to consume that savings plan as well to maximize your discounts even more. Okay, so that's what it looks like to customize your look-back period, but what if, I'm not sure if that's the amount I want, and $29 an hour is a big commitment, and I have to go get approval from finance, and I don't want to do that, but I have auto approval for anything under $15 an hour. So I'm just going to type in $15 an hour, and I can run that same exact analysis, and it's going to calculate all of the savings plans per hour coverage, utilization, and savings amounts. And here we go. We can see the leftover on-demand usage that's still going to be out there. And this is great if you have a strategy of purchasing savings plans incrementally. Again, we hope before you leave for the conference, you can engage your FinOps team or go in the console and think about making a purchase right away. It doesn't need to be the full recommended amount, but you can start saving with the highest discount amounts on your like serverless and other high discount savings services pretty quickly by just making a smaller purchase. Leaving a little bit of that on demand for additional future analysis, optimization programs or campaigns, just still leaves you that flexibility to make some more optimization and FinOps decisions later. So you can make these smaller purchases like this and use Purchase Analyzer to make sure you're still netting some good savings. In this case, because we purchased a lesser amount, we're still getting most of the savings. We're still getting $3,200 of the savings, even though the commitment we made is quite a bit less. So again, you still yield a very high amount of savings when you buy smaller savings plans because it consumes the highest discount first. So once you do these analysis and you have different look-back periods, I'm actually going to switch to a 7-day, and we're going to look at, say the last 7 days is more representative of what I want to do. And I want to see how much the system recommends me purchase based on the last 7 days. Once you make these decisions, you can quickly come in here, refresh the recommendation, get the latest data from the most fresh usage, and then you can click this Add to Cart button right here and make your purchase. In this case, we're recommending a $22 purchase for $2,400 a month in savings. And you can quickly just add to cart and make your purchase. Once the purchase is complete, and you'd like to, actually, sorry, another question, Adam, was, what if I made a mistake? What if I overpurchased? What if, like I'm afraid of making the purchase because what if I find out we were doing a migration and I wasn't aware of it or something like that? You have 7 days to return a savings plan as long as it's within the same month. So I recommend generally, if you're not 100% positive on your purchase, to not purchase at the end of the month, because once the month rolls over, we close the bill. But you have a 7-day window to return any savings plan under $100 an hour. So this is a really nice feature. It protects you from any mistakes, fat fingers, or anything like that if you accidentally added another zero in the purchase, things like that. So this 7-day return button is something we launched a couple years ago, and this just helps increase the confidence that it's okay if you fat finger something. You're not gonna go have to engage support. You can just return that savings plan. And even if you make the purchase and begin to track coverage and utilization and it's not looking right, your coverage is way too high or your utilization is way too low, you can return that savings plan and purchase a different amount. Okay, so moving on to coverage and utilization report. Say we've made the purchase, then I can come in here and look at coverage, and this will show you what percentage of your on-demand spend is covered by the purchases you made. Now my coverage is really low because I made a purchase and then I returned it because I wanted to have nice big recommendations for the demo. So my coverage is pretty low, but you can come in here and track how much of your spend is being covered by commitments and discounts, and then you can also look at what resources are consuming what commitments. In this case, I've got a bunch of compute spend here and everything, but you'll see these line items for these different services and which services are consuming which amount of your savings plan spend. So you can filter and click through different service types to understand which ones are contributing the most to the savings you're achieving from your savings plans. Alternatively, we have the utilization report, which will show you what percentage of your savings plans are being consumed, like we showed earlier in the slides. So that's it for our demo. I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint and invite Adam back up on stage here.
Let's give Rick a round of applause if we could. He covered a lot of ground with that. Really well done. I think these technologies that are in place in the billing console are incredibly helpful. And hopefully you saw something new, at least the icon for Database Savings Plan, if you haven't seen that before, or you haven't seen that before because it went live yesterday. As we close this presentation, and we'll be around following the presentation, if there's any questions, feel free to come on up. But our recommendation and call to action is definitely to access it. As Rick just covered, no mistakes, right? You can do that return within 7 days, but identify it, share it with your teams, access it, try it, see what the recommendations are doing. Isolate that custom range where you know you have something interesting going on in your environment and see what the recommendation is, it comes back with. So that's access it, try it, we think is incredibly important. And as always, we want your feedback. We want your feedback from this session, which you probably have on your phones to fill out a quick survey. But we also have some websites, and I know Rick and myself will make ourselves available to answer any questions that you might have. But send feedback. You know, we'd love to hear how this is working for you because it is a really important launch for us that some people in the room have been waiting for 9 years, I think, by those hands. So thank you for attending. It was great doing this with you, Rick. Appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your reInvent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.